It's kind of interesting to think that when it comes to Animal Crossing, we live in the timeline where the horse from The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was a villager in Animal Crossing. Yes, if we back up a little bit back into the interesting days of after Animal Crossing New Leaf released, but before New Horizons released, there was a little update rolled out called the Welcome Amiibo Update, and boom! A bunch of interesting villagers were introduced that would exist for a short while in this game, but would not return when Animal Crossing New Horizons released. Matter of fact, over the course of the entire Animal Crossing franchise, there are a lot of villagers that were introduced at one point just to be retired and forgotten about completely by the time a new Animal Crossing game would release. What happened to these guys? Why were they written out of the game series, and where are they now? This one gets a little weird, but there's a lot to talk about. Now, of course, we already mentioned Epona from the Legend of Zelda series, but there were a couple of other villagers introduced that were crossovers from other Nintendo properties. Straight up, Ganon could show up and live in your town. I don't know how I would feel about that if Ganon was just living in my Animal Crossing town. I feel like he would be there to kind of steal some of the vibes. They got Medley the bird from The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, and also a villager inspired by Link himself, but in wolf form. So we get Wolf Link, but the way that it's spelled here is W Link. I never really liked the little initial thing they did. I wish they just either called him Wolf or just Link, not W Link, because I mean at the end of the day he's still Link, right? Just in a wolf form. Like, we don't call Kiki Cat Kiki, right? Her name's just Kiki. I think everybody would know Wolf Link is Link in wolf form without having to put the W there. Now, these characters were pretty rare, and you could only get them originally by getting the amiibo characters associated with them, and then you'd scan them into your DS game, and bam, you would get these 4 Zelda characters. But that's not where our mysterious non-Animal Crossing character stops, right? There was Cece and Viche, who were from the Splatoon series, who would show up with amiibo support, along with this terrifying looking fellow named Inkwell. The character Felon came straight from the Monster Hunter series, specifically looking like the way that this cat looks in Monster Hunter Diary Poka Poka Airu Village, and was also introduced for Happy Home Designer, but would never be seen again by the time New Horizons rolled around. And you know what? You might think, okay, well, look at these characters. It makes sense. They were just like a one-time special little crossover thing, and Nintendo doesn't really do the crossovers with Animal Crossing, so why would these guys come back? Well, joke's on us, because they did do more crossovers with Animal Crossing New Horizons when they did the whole Sanrio crossover, which to a lot of people in North America never even knew that this happened in Animal Crossing New Leaf before Animal Crossing New Horizons. The characters Rilla, Marty, Etol, Chai, Chelsea, and Toby all originally appeared in Animal Crossing New Leaf as a special crossover event in Europe and in Japan. You had to have the special amiibo cards that you would scan into your game, and then you could have them move in. These amiibo cards wouldn't be available in North America until 2021, when they became exclusive to Target, and there was like a race against the clock to try to get your hands on these cards for a while. It was insane, but at least these characters were able to come back for New Horizons. These other ones that were Nintendo themed or Monster Hunter themed in Felon's case, RIP, they haven't been seen since. There's still 2 other characters that were also introduced in New Leaf that would never make a return ever again either. There's Philly, who was a 7-Eleven horse. There's obviously this huge mystery as to whether or not this character is like the 7th hero out of the other like big superhero characters like Kid Cat, Agent S, Big Top, and Rocket. See how they all have little numbers here? And then there's Philly, number 7. What happened to 5 and 6? I don't know. This character would also return for Happy Home Designer, but then that was it. Never was to return in Animal Crossing New Horizons. We never even got a 7-Eleven crossover in New Horizons, and I think that is a real shame. Then there's the interesting villager Holden, who actually looks like a villager that was maybe designed by some poorly drawn AI. But no, this is the actual way that this villager looks. Like, look at this. This is in-game footage of Holden here. This was part of a limited run type collaboration between Nintendo and Animal Crossing and a company known as Fueki, which are known for like their stationery and like other types of arts and crafts type related things that you can buy from their stores. And the whole collaboration itself was kind of interesting. It was officially called Dobutsu no Nori, which is a pun on Dobutsu no Mori, the official name for Animal Crossing in Japan. But Nori is the Japanese word for glue. So this is our glue villager, I guess. They ended up using the mascot for Fueki, which is Fueki-kun. And from there, we were introduced with the character Holden. I do have to say though, some of the other little like collaborative glue pots that you could buy during this time were pretty cool. I don't know how regularly available these are in Japan nowadays, but it was a cool little collaboration they did. But yeah, this villager, also for an introduced character later on in the series, would never be seen from again, not appearing in New Horizons either. So rest in peace, Holden. Now, let's take a step back because we've only looked at the small handful of characters from Animal Crossing New Leaf, but there's actually a giant pile of characters that probably should have been brought back at one point or another and never ever returned again for one reason or another, and we want to figure out why, or at least speculate as to why, or just question why. Now, you've probably seen this villager talked about in Animal Crossing circles before, and if you thought that this was a forgotten villager that Nintendo left behind, you would be correct. But the backstory behind Meow is a little bit different than maybe what you would suspect. Matter of fact, there was another villager paired with Meow that also appeared in Animal Forest E+, which essentially was the super special deluxe edition of Animal Crossing for the GameCube that only released in Japan and had more villagers than any other game. But this is Meow and this is Bao. Both of these characters could only be added to your game if you had the special E-card back when Nintendo was doing the whole like e-reader stuff. And what's interesting about these characters is that I guess they're robots. They have like these monochromatic LCD screens as their faces, almost like they're a calculator or something. I don't know. Now, one thing that's really interesting though is that both of these characters were actually inspired by a real world toy device that was kind of getting popular in Japan at the time. There was a toy called the Baolingual, which was a translator device that you're supposed to put up to your dog, and it would let you know what your dog is thinking, and you could talk to your dog. And after that toy was popular, they made Meowlingual. Also, same idea here. And you can very easily, by looking at both of these toys, see how they served as the inspiration for these characters themselves. Now, apparently, how these would work would be you would hold the device up to your pet, they would bark or meow, and then the device would analyze the bark or meow against a bunch of other pre-programmed barks and meows that they had, and you would be able to tell what mood your pet was in based on the sound that it would be categorized into, with 6 different potential emotions that would be displayed. Then from there, you could, I don't know, like cheer up your pet. I guess you couldn't really translate things back and forth. It was more like a emotion reader, but hey, it was an interesting time to be alive. We only ever got the dog version in North America, and I don't think it was very popular, and the cat version never even left Japan, but in more recent years, an iPhone version of Baolingual did end up releasing. All of this information, not so relevant anymore because these characters would never be seen again in Animal Crossing, but I do think it is an interesting backstory behind why these characters ever existed in the first place. Fun fact though, the company that made these, Takara, ended up presenting the prototype to this device to the then Japanese Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi, and then Koizumi would go on and present these to Russian President Vladimir Putin for each of his dogs so that Putin could talk to his dogs, I guess. What a timeline we live in. Now, usually cat villagers are pretty popular in Animal Crossing, so it is surprising that a character like Meow wouldn't return down the road as like a special appearance. But there is one other cat villager who also showed up in Animal Forest E+ that never returned again, with the name Pierre. He was a clown cat villager, which I really like that. Maybe there wasn't a need for more clown villagers because we already had Pietro, but I feel like if this character was brought back, it would probably be one of the most popular original Animal Crossing Generation 1 characters that has been gone for a long time that people would really, really want to have. I just see it working out. I'm very surprised this one never made a return. So when it comes to Animal Crossing stuff nowadays, you'll notice that new villagers that were introduced after the first generation of Animal Crossing games usually stick around and will appear in later games. It's mostly just been new villagers being introduced for the first time in the newer games, and some older villagers finally returning after being gone for a while that has been notable, but there are a few interesting cases that are also worth bringing up here besides the ones we've already talked about. Like in Animal Crossing Wild World, we had the villager Champ who was introduced. Now, this villager has only appeared in 2 games, Animal Crossing Wild World for the Nintendo DS and Animal Crossing City Folk, before being cut out of the game for Animal Crossing New Leaf, being one of the newest villagers introduced to be removed from a new release of a game. Now, you might have heard of some crazy theories involving this character, but there hasn't ever been any real confirmation as to why this character was cut out of the game. The biggest leading theory was because of the fact that the character Porter from the original GameCube version of the game was a character, and then after they changed the way that multiplayer worked, where you would travel through gates in Animal Crossing Wild World and City Folk, there wasn't a need for the character Porter, so they took a design similar to him and created a fresh villager in the form of Champ. In both Animal Crossing Wild World and City Folk, Champ does have like a little bit of a train-themed home, and His catchphrase was "Choo Choo," which obviously made a lot of people suspect that this character is Porter, but in a villager form. I don't fully buy that because his personality is still quite a bit different than the form of what Porter was actually like in that first Animal Crossing game, and Champ has the jock personality, which I guess could work. I think if anything, this character is just a clever homage to the character Porter, but not necessarily the same exact character per se. What is interesting though is when Animal Crossing New Leaf released, Porter would be reintroduced as a character working the train station, and then in turn, Champ would be removed from Animal Crossing New Leaf. So this character is one of the few characters to only have appeared in Animal Crossing Wild World and Animal Crossing City Folk, but not in any Animal Crossing game again. And if we take it a step further, we can look at Animal Crossing New Horizons, which did not feature Porter once again, just like Wild World and City Folk, but also did not feature Champ returning either. I guess you could make the argument that Porter does make an appearance as an amiibo in New Horizons, but still, Champ is a villager that is missing to this day. We don't know what happened to him. Maybe he was Porter after all. I don't know. I don't buy the theory. I think it's more just like a clever homage. I don't think they necessarily do these things where it's like the same character being a character, but this would be like a one-time instance of it happening, and they haven't done anything with it yet. So this character also didn't appear in Pocket Camp, in case you're wondering, but he did, randomly enough, appear in the anime very briefly. So a little more Champ lore for you. Now, of course, besides the weird cat, dog, robot-looking villagers, there were other Animal Crossing villagers from this original generation that ended up just never making their way back into later Animal Crossing games. So let's take a look at the ones that were first introduced in Dobutsu no Mori E+, which was the Japanese Ultimate Edition of Animal Crossing, because it had new villagers that would never come back again. Some of these characters were e-reader card exclusive too, which means that they were even more rare than what a normal Animal Crossing villager would be. Like Isle here, who is a bear who was lazy apparently. From the pictures on Wikipedia, he had a weird home. There was Analog, who was this like greenish penguin, and today is the only penguin character who has not returned in Animal Crossing since his original debut. There was Carrot the cow, who I guess she would have been the Animal Crossing equivalent to Carrot Top, but it makes more sense because at least the top of Carrot is green, where I don't understand how a carrot top would be red hair. Sorry, side tangent. There was Clara, who was a hippo. There was Jen and Joe, who both have really cool designs, and I would have personally liked to have both of these in my current island in Animal Crossing. So these ones I definitely feel for that I feel like we're missing out on, because these would have been cool characters to have come back. There's Jubei, who was like a dark orange lion with this like weird goatee looking thing that I'm not really a fan of. I'll be honest, I'm not missing him that much. Not like the other ones, but I'm sure someone out there might have liked him. Then there's Kit, who I straight up feel like Kit was just taken from Conquer before like Conquer became like Bad Fur Day. Like maybe the early prototype days of Conquer when it was supposed to be like an all ages game. That is who I feel like was inspiration for this. And then of course there's like that whole creepypasta character like Hazel or something like that also looks like this, but that's not a real character. It's just a prototype character that was like found in the game's code that's not real. So yeah, I don't know. This character is interesting though. I'm surprised Kit hasn't returned, but it also makes sense because of how close it looks to Conquer. Okay, then let's look at Megumi and Poco. Now, Megumi, I get why they cut her. I mean, she kind of ends up looking a lot like Cookie, I think. Poco, on the other hand, solid design for an Animal Crossing villager, especially from being like a jock type character, but whatever. Cut him out, I guess. He doesn't get to come back either. Nintendo, next game, please. Also, apparently, according to the e-reader card info, Poco is supposedly Ike's child? We haven't seen too many characters related. A couple of instances where they're related, but not too many. So this is interesting, and the resemblance is there for sure. There's this weird frog called Sunny that always has her tongue out, and I kind of like that. It's such a weird character design, but it's kind of the best. I don't know. If you agree with me, let me know. I think this one might be one of the top tier Lost Animal Crossing characters that's just like a normal character from the E+ version. And then there was a special wolf called Taro, and this wolf is interesting because in the entire series so far, there has not been a jock wolf villager, with this one exception here in this one obscure version of Animal Crossing where Dobutsu no Mori E+ had a jock wolf. That's it though. Never again, and he hasn't been brought back yet. So maybe sometime in the future we'll see him. There's some other interesting ones. There's this duck called Fruity. There's a peppy kangaroo called Koharu. There was this anteater villager called Lulu, but it also shared the same name as the English hippo villager Lulu, so there's some confusion inclusion there already, but the Anteater version only appeared in the E Plus game and never came back again. Apparently, she was a little bit different than some of the other villagers. According to Animal Crossing Wiki, if you scanned her E Plus card, she would show up washed up on the shores of the island, similar to what Gulliver was like, but she was an islander villager, not a full villager, so she was like kind of restricted to the other island most of the time. There were a couple other island villagers introduced in E Plus, like Madame Rosa, who also could be shown washed up on the islands, which I think was just a thing for islanders maybe. There was Masa, a dog islander with a crazy haircut, and then these two islanders, Patricia and Weldon. Now, as I was going through this list, I did skip over a couple of very interesting characters that haven't been back that I thought were extra unique, and I wanted to talk about them a little more in depth here. So let's talk about Nindori to start off with, because look at this guy. This is terrifying, but also kind of cool. Now, what's interesting about the backstory here is that during a special promotion with the Nintendo magazine Nintendo Dream, there was this contest in Japan where they would let readers submit their own designs that would be turned into a villager if you won the contest. And apparently someone named Suzukaze-san from Tokyo ended up being the winner, which was announced in volume 100. And in volume 102 of the Nintendo magazine, there would be a special code with the e-reader card, and you would be able to scan the character in that way. And that was the only way you could get this character. That is pretty unique. Now, Nindori was an ostrich character and the only ostrich character to still be absent, but apparently this character would evolve to be more of the mascot for Nintendo Dream well beyond his initial introduction. So there is a pretty cool story there. Similarly, there was an interesting character called Shinabiru who looks terrified at all times, but was a character that was exclusively promoted alongside Famitsu, which was a famous Nintendo magazine publication. If you wanted this character, you had to get the promotional card that was bundled only in the September 5, 2003 weekly issue of Famitsu magazine. Now, way back in the day, before amiibo were a thing, there were these things called Mori o Sukuro figurines, which were essentially a collection of Animal Crossing figures that you could collect. And if you collected figurine set F50, you would get access to an e-reader card that, when scanned into the game, would give you the character Shukichi, who's this bird with really high eyebrows. I just want to highlight real quick though, these last villagers I think are super interesting though, because if you think about it, these characters not only were like exclusive to this one obscure version of Animal Crossing in Japan that never came out in the West, but also you had to have an e-reader card, and then also you had to actually get the cards and have the thing that connected the e-reader to the Game Boy to the GameCube, or however that worked. Nonetheless, I think it's really cool that we have an archive of these characters, but yeah, I'd like to see some of them maybe come back in the future. It wouldn't be the first time that some characters that were introduced were later added in way down the road, so I think it's time we can see some come back. But we're not finished yet, because we haven't even gone back to the oldest Animal Crossing game yet, Animal Forest for the Nintendo 64, where we saw the introduction of a lot of characters, and with Animal Crossing on the GameCube, there was more characters that were introduced that also didn't make their way later on. And while we focused on the E Plus exclusive ones, what about the characters that really should be back if they were in the main release of the game by now, but still aren't here yet? They're kind of interesting, so buckle up. Now, if you played the GameCube version of Animal Crossing back in the day, there's a good chance that you might have had some of these villagers that we're about to talk about. They would only appear in the first generation of games, so we have Aziz, Belle, and Bessie, who were all cut. There's Carmen the mouse, who is interesting because this character ended up getting cut and then later on would be replaced by a brand new villager with the same name, Carmen, but was a peppy rabbit villager instead of a snooty mouse. Then there was this terrifying looking mouse named Chico, then another cow slash bull villager known as Chuck. There was a lot of these in the first game. Cupcake, who was a snooty bear cub villager, which is one of the ones that I'm actually surprised haven't made a return in one way or another. And then there was Dozer, who wasn't a bear cub, just a bear wearing a bear shirt. Then we had Emerald, who was maybe the most generic, normal looking frog character in Animal Crossing history, who literally wore a frog shirt. There was Hombo, who was like a jock pig villager. I kind of like this guy. I don't know, maybe it's the headband or the name or just a mix of it all, but I'm kind kind of sad we don't have him anymore. And then we had 2 jock chickens named Hank and Hector, which we haven't seen since. Then there was Huggy, who seemed like a pretty chill koala, and Iggy, who I don't know what this dude has seen, but he has definitely seen something. And then Jane, which is an interesting one because this character was completely redesigned from the way that this character originally looked in the first release of the game and was changed for the Western audiences. Mind you, she only has the purple appearance in the West release of the game, where the later release in Japan and all of its original releases looked like this. The redesign likely was coming from a time where Nintendo was maybe extra sensitive in how they handled character depictions after the controversy that they faced back in the day with Pokemon and the Pokemon Jinx. There was a lot of allegations of the Pokemon appearing to be in blackface. So when this game was coming to the West, I guess they made the decision to get ahead of it and change the way the character looked, so nothing could be said, but that's just my speculation. But I feel like that's a pretty good educated guess here. There was Marcy, the peppy kangaroo, that's gone. And then remember Lulu, we talked about earlier, that anteater that shared the same name as another Animal Crossing villager, Lulu the hippo? Well, Lulu the hippo also existed and also never came back. Then there was Liz, the pink alligator, and Lay, who was a chicken. And then there was just a couple of like straight up normal-ish characters that just weren't chosen to be returned in Wild World onward and still haven't been picked yet to make a reappearance, like Penny and Nosegay, Otis, then there's Oxford, another bull. Then we have Petunia over here, Quetzal, who was a jock eagle villager who might have been inspired by the Quetzalcoatl, I don't know how to say that word correctly, but it's like the bird-like Aztec god for like native aboriginal appearances, so he never came back. There was another chicken villager named Rhoda, who was a snooty chicken, and she would not return either, and I mean maybe was replaced with Rhonda, the rhinoceros in Wild World, but you know, I'm not 100% sure that that's the change here. That's just like a 1-letter change and a species change. And then Rolo the hippo also didn't make it. Then there was a pig named Sue E that was cut. And for our final set of villagers, we had Tiara the rhinoceros, Sven, who looks like a old goat, literally, Twerp, who actually looks like he could maybe live up to the name that was assigned to him. There was Valise the kangaroo, and last but not least, possibly my favorite out of all of them, and coincidentally the last in alphabetical order, Woolio, who looked like this. This is an incredible looking villager. I cannot believe out of all of them we've looked at that this one in particularly hasn't been brought back. I mean, look how incredible he is. I mean, I think they could update his personality and maybe give him the smug personality that's newer to the games, because I think that would fit him. But like, this dude definitely needs to come back. That's like top on my wish list for future Animal Crossing games. It's time to bring Woolio back, and that's the hill that I want to die on. Anyways, that's a look at all of the Animal Crossing villagers that have been cut from the Animal Crossing series that haven't been seen in a very, very long time. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe. Also, check out this video we did where we looked at every single special Animal Crossing character and the lore behind them. I might be working on a big video where we look at the lore behind every single Animal Crossing villager ever, but that's going to be a big project, so we'll see you down the road. I have a couple other things I want to put out first. So thanks for watching. We'll see you guys all next time with the new video, and yeah, subscribe. Thanks.